blasted from your streets. Pandora Nights.
Good afternoon. I am your host. You are now tuned in. Real Podcast Talk with Miss TML. I have a very special guest with us today. Actually, we're still in the daytime. You see the light. But I want to just introduce this man. He's incredible. And he has a story to tell. He's a book author, CEO, Mr. Mike Curry. 3 Pounds of Pressure, Life After Prison. I just want to say that you are just incredible in regards to what you've done in the last couple of years in your transition back home. And I just watch, what you and Trees have built with your story, and it's amazing. So kudos to you, flowers always. And I just want you to know how important you are to this platform and to the story of Boston. And just the violence and things that have happened and transpired in regards to politics and just laws and things like that. And I have your book here. Just want to say that. Okay. 3 Pounds of Pressure. So I was, definitely blessed to have this maybe about 2 years. And I just want to say, like, the characters and the people that you write about are people that, it resonates with me, because every one of these stories and just the different things that have happened in the book are things that I can recall that have happened to people that I know growing up in Boston in some way. Not the same exact stories, but a lot of the same backstories, you know what I mean, in regards to just coming from broken homes and just having, these struggles on our backs and just not understanding, like, this is not normal. And that was one of the things that as I grew up and I went other places, I started to realize, like, the things that I had endured and witnessed and seen growing up in the city of Boston, it wasn't normal. You know what I mean? This was not something that you would think that everyday children go through or that they see or that they've witnessed in life. And you actually put it in a book. So congratulations to you, Mike.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for allowing me on your platform, and thank you for interviewing me and speaking about the book, reading the book. 3 Pounds of Pressure is real dear to me. So when I wrote the book, I wrote it from the experiences that I experienced when I was in the streets.
Yeah. And now, are you portraying the role is Scar you? That was one of the things that I wasn't sure about, and I was like, is Scar him or is it Raw? Is it this one? Like, looking at
every character in the book is a little bit of me. So I took a little bit of me, put it in Scar, put a little bit in Ra, put a little bit in Kwame. So all the characters in the book, it's just a little bits of pieces of myself.
Okay. All right. I like that. And I mean, for me, like, I look back and I say to myself, at 15, I was going to Nashua Street to see my now ex, but currently at the time boyfriend, and he was facing a murder charge. And that for me was like the rudest awakening ever, because at 30, I realized this is not something that you want your 15-year-old daughter to be doing. You know what I mean? And having to deal with. But I realized there was a lot of females in that same, circumstance where they had this guy that they were in love with and he got caught up in the streets. And, these were the things that we just dealt with and we just had to become a part of. And it was a part of our culture, just going to jails and having to visit people and things like that. And there were just so many people that were put to the side because they didn't have lawyers or they didn't know the education behind law and how to fight for themselves. So what was that process like for you?
I started around the age of 15 as well, going in and out of the juvenile justice system. And then, I graduated to Nashua Street, South Bay, then upstate, and then eventually the federal. So, my life, or the first half of my life, was mainly prison related. So it became numb to me just
Yeah.
going to prison. And I didn't really look at it as a bad thing, because when I was in prison, all my friends and associates and people that I knew was there. So it was like kind of like a joyous celebration to say, you
Yeah.
know. I look at it now like we was lost, but at
Yeah.
that time we looked at it like we was just doing what we supposed to do to survive within our community. So when I first went to Nashua Street, I was 17 years old. And one of the first things I did was when I seen my case manager in Nashua Street, I told him I was still under the supervision of the Department of Youth Services. So he called the youth services, the DYS, and told them that I got arrested, and they told him that they didn't want me no more. That they was washing their hands with me, and that really made me look at things different, because I was 17, one of the
Yeah.
youngest in the unit, and I was just really trying to make a name for myself at that time. So I was willing to do any and everything to get to that status of having my name being heard
Mhm.
throughout the prison period, throughout the
Mhm.
county jail.
Mhm.
And it really crushed my moms to see me go from juvenile to straight to Nashua Street.
Mhm.
But I looked at that time, I looked at my friends more closer than my family.
Yeah. And it's true. It's definitely, product of your environment and the things that you're growing up around, and you're being told this is the way and this is the way you survive. And I think that, a lot of times in the city, in the inner city of Boston, I think in the early 80s and 90s, people were just trying to survive and trying to, like you said, make a name for themselves and, just be a part of something. And it was hard because you want to be a part of something, but you don't want to lose your life doing it. You know what I'm saying? And just having that level of respect, and just, people that really, understand that this is what you're doing it for. You know what I mean? So and I look back now too at, just the things that I feel like we kind of provoked, you know what I'm saying, in so many ways. Like it was like we were, children of our own, product of our own environments, and thinking that this is the way, and that, we have to, carry guns, or, be the biggest man on the block by doing this, or getting that respect. And at the end of the day, did it really amount to anything in our lives? You know what I'm saying? Like that was my biggest thing, is like looking back at my brothers and my cousins and my uncles and the people that lost their lives and, just went through prison and went through these years of loss, of not knowing, am I doing this for the right reasons? What are the reasons I'm doing this for? Um, and just coming some type of vindication. So I think for me, the biggest vindication for you is being able to talk about the story today, and being able to say that you're no longer the product of your environment, and that you've evolved past that, and you're trying to change things, and you're trying to change the narratives. And that is what's important to me, because I find that there's a lot of men that are very educated, and they go to prison and they get this knowledge and this wisdom, and it's all about how they apply it when they come, back home. And not everybody can do that. Like the rehabilitation process is hard, and not going back to jail. So that was, one of my biggest struggles with anybody that I had that, was in prison, that had spent a long period of time. It's like, how do you know that you're not going to go back? Are you sure that you're not going to do the things that you did previously to go back to jail, or not engage in those certain situations? So what was it for you, Mike? What would you say was the last straw where you just said, this is it?
Like when I got arrested in 2007, they charged me as a career criminal in the federal prison system, and the federal government charged me as a career criminal. So
Wow.
I was facing a life bid for
Yeah.
drugs, and what made me change was seeing my mother cry
Yeah.
continuously, and understanding that if I didn't get life this time, I was facing an automatic life sentence the next time I get arrested. So I
Mhm.
was able to plea out to 16 years, and I
Mhm.
took the 16 years, and from that day forward, I started to rehabilitate myself mentally. So I
Mhm.
had to stray away from the old crowds that I was used to being amongst, and it had to stop while I was in prison. So I had to stray away from those who reminded me of those of my peers from the streets. And
Yep.
it's easy to do drugs in jail, sell drugs in jail, commit violent crimes in jail. So I had to backpedal because I know my triggers. So I had
Mhm.
to backpedal and discipline myself. And what made me discipline myself was I wanted to put my thoughts on paper. And
Yep.
that's when I started to write actually 3 pounds of pressure. So that's
Wow.
when I started to write. It wasn't day one. It was actually probably like within my second year, because my
Uh-huh.
first year I was in the county waiting to get sentenced, waiting to see how much time I was facing. And then after I got sentenced, I had to acclimate to my society, to the prison society that I
Yep.
was in. And once I was comfortable, that's when I picked up the pen and I started writing about my life, but in a fictional way.
Yeah. And you did an amazing job. Like I said, it resonates with me. It reminds me of when I read The Coldest Winter Ever and how I felt connected to winter as a young girl growing up in a crime organized family, and just having that level of insight into someone else's life and journey. And when you start to mention certain things in the book, and I was just like, wow, this brought me back. This resonates with me. And I find that there's so many people like that. You know what I mean? That grew up in that time where Boston was the place that, you found crime, you found drugs, you found prostitution, you found everything happening right next door to you. And whether or not, or in your own home, you know what I'm saying? And that was just something that we lived with in the inner city. And, you know, traveling other places, I realized that Boston was never looked at that way from the outside world. It was like, what? You guys have a ghetto in Boston? What? You guys have, and I'm like, they've been keeping all this, under wraps. And never mind the fact that, like you said, they made laws against, juveniles, and as well the three strike law. You know what I mean? And this is where, a lot of people that did not do horrendous crimes but are serving time based on, you know, their decisions 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. It's like, and I think the time for murder is like 15 years. And these people were getting, way past that. And it was like, when do we put our foot down and say enough is enough, and who is fighting for us? You know what I'm saying? And I just feel like you're one of the advocates. You're one of the people who are now out here, campaigning for the inner city of Boston when it comes to, laws against juveniles, against felons, and, just understanding that our path wasn't necessarily easy. You know what I'm saying? And you should never be judged by you know, the outside, and your past experiences. You should be judged by the content of your character. Like Martin Luther King said, it's like, listen, like, we all have the ability to change. And I think that it depends on the environment. It depends on what we surround ourselves with, like you said. Um, so what do you think has been the biggest challenge in this journey of transitioning?
Well, the biggest challenge for me was just coming home. Well, when I first came home, I automatically was able to get a job, so that
Yeah.
wasn't a barrier for me. Living wasn't a barrier for me. One of the barriers was being social, being
Yeah.
amongst people again, and having trust in people, and
Yeah.
understanding that loyalty still exists. Because when you're in prison and you doing time, and everyone that you believe was loyal to you or you trusted disappeared on you, you
Yeah.
that dissipated from your character. So now it was like I was had to be loyal to myself.
Yeah.
So, and that was trusting people's words and making sure that the circle that I was in was really for me, was really there to help me, just
Mhm.
understanding life all over again. I came home when I first went in, the iPhone just came out. like
Right.
literally just came out the month that I came home. And then when I come home, I think we was on iPhone 8 or
Yeah.
iPhone 9, whatever we was on. So it was like 15 years later, it's
Time
like
on.
everybody using smartphones. So that was a challenge for me because I still had pride issues and I didn't want to ask someone to help me use something that I consider minor or help me navigate through something such as the cell phone, such
Yeah.
as the internet. And I strive to do everything on my own. And
Yeah.
then once I realized that I needed help, and I and that's when I started to reach out to others, and that was the biggest barrier for me, just having trust in people and putting people within my circle, which was actually strangers.
Yeah. And I can totally understand that because like you said, it's you've been in your, surroundings for the last 15 years, and now to go outside of that and have to now trust people in the real world is just as hard. You know what I mean? Because you just don't know, and it's so many more variables now, and in regards to people's purpose and what they want, to be in regards to your friendship or your connection and things like that. So yeah, it's very hard to, adjust to that, I think. And like you said, it's about being social and actually knowing how to say to people, I need help or I don't understand this. And I think that was the biggest transition that I watched, my uncles go through and, my stepdad and things like that was that, coming home after all those years and having to learn life again. And her learning how to live in this life now, is not easy. And just the things that we take for granted, just being able to get up every day and do what we want to do. You didn't have that opportunity for for a big part of your life. And I think that that's the part that I think people don't think about until it happens. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
realized even with my brother, it was like he was like, "Listen, I'm living for the streets. These are my brothers." And then when he went to jail, it made him realize like, now I'm taken away from my family. Now I'm taken away from the people that, I want to protect. And I can't even be there for them. You know what I mean? Because I made one bad mistake or one wrong decision. And I think that's just important to recognize, like it's your choice. We all have a conscience. We all have a right of choice. You know what I mean? And I just want our youth to make better choices. Um,
Exactly. And I feel the same way. And that's why when I wrote the book, 3 Pounds of Pressure, I started from a juvenile mindset because
mm-hmm.
that's when I was at my most vulnerable state,
Yeah,
where anyone could, not anyone, but like my older peers could tell me about something or how they felt. And I might resurrect that. I might go and handle that for them. So it
yeah,
was more like my mind was so tender at that time that I was willing to appease others by committing violent acts or
yeah,
doing things that I wouldn't normally do
yeah.
if I wasn't amongst those that was already doing it. So I became a product of my environment because my environment was all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
So by it being all that I knew, everyone that I grew up in, everyone that I grew up with, we all did the same thing. So it was like normal to us to
Yeah,
commit violent crimes. It was normal for us to go to jail. It was normal for us to lie to our parents. It was normal for us to sell drugs. It was normal
yeah,
for us to not go to school. It was normal for us to just say F the world. So,
yeah,
and that was just the normalcy of growing up in the inner city of Boston where the community is segregated by street gangs.
yeah,
So my neighborhood might be warring with a neighborhood right across the street. And
yeah,
then when we get to prison, somehow we get cool.
yeah. Which is
And then,
crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. So it was like, I always thought as a juvenile, if I seen an enemy or what they call a ops these days
Yeah,
in prison, it's immediately go time.
yeah,
But when you go to prison and you see them, it's like you become friends and you become the best of friends. So
yeah,
I had to realize year after year after year, me being in prison, that the street light was a facade.
yeah. And it was definitely it's definitely a I want to say it's a Willie Lynch syndrome, but it's kind of like it's putting us against each other in our own communities and against streets that we don't even own. You know what I mean? Like, people don't understand the level of segregation in Boston, and how I felt like I couldn't talk to people from certain places because my cousins had beef with those people. You
Yep.
know what I mean? This is the culture that I grew up in. It's like you can't take that away. No matter what, you're always guilty by association. You're guilty by where you grew up. The first thing that people ask when they're in the city of Boston, where you from? Because automatically right then they're now categorizing you. They're now
Yep.
stereotyping you. And that was like, it was like for me to go somewhere else and realize I'm not a label. I'm not, oh, from Mattapian. I'm not from Dorchester. I'm just me. I'm from Boston. That's it. You know what I mean? Like that was where I had to learn like that level of life doesn't exist when you're not in that inner city anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like this is just not what it is. And like it took a lot. It took a lot to rebrand my mind into understanding that you don't have to live life wondering where a person's from or how you're going to deal with them because they're from a certain place that your people don't get along with. That's hard. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
again,
It is
people
hard.
that you have cousins, you have, family, you have brothers that are fighting still to this day. I don't understand now the level of, gang violence in Boston because I'm not entwined anymore in that. But when I hear things and I see things, I'm like, there's no rhyme or no reason. Back when we were growing up, it was for money, it was for status, it was for power. Sometimes, a lot of times it was for girls. That a lot of people lost their lives or, were in the streets warring or whatever. But when my uncles and them were coming up, Corbett Street, all those different areas, like it was about money and power and people, taking over blocks because they wanted to be able to capitalize on the money that was circulating through that street. Now it's like you don't even know what the reason for is for, and people don't even necessarily have a reason. And I started to realize that these kids don't grow up with the same morals or the same ethics of the OGs. You know what I mean? You pay respect to your OGs and you have that level of integrity. The OG factor is somewhat gone. You know what I'm saying? Like they feel like they the OGs. They feel like they've already lived their life at 15, 16 years old, and they feel like you're not as important as them now. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard. Like I say to people, coming back from prison and realizing that the streets are not the streets that you grew up on anymore. And times have
Exactly.
changed, and you don't have the same, camaraderie. You don't have the same level of integrity or morals. You know what I'm saying? It's lost, and I just feel like a lot of that comes from, just the broken families with the drugs and, just the segregation. A lot of people went their own ways and did their own thing. And, oh, that's not my problem. You know what I'm saying? And they kind of just closed their door and didn't deal with it. And I think that we need to have those discussions. We need to have more community, more family oriented events. You know what I'm saying? I think that a lot of that is broken. And I don't know. How do we fix it? Is the question.
I mean, we fix it by direction because a lot of youth these days and during my day, we was misdirected, and
Yeah.
the older heads was misdirected. So if I'm misdirected, then I cater to violence, so I'm gonna promote it. Like
Mm-hmm.
if my neighborhood is not cool with the neighborhood across the street, everything we say about that neighborhood is negative. So what you think those that's under us that look up to us, they ain't gonna like the younger generation from the neighborhood that we was warring with. So we need better direction and we need a better outlet for these youth. And when I say outlet, I mean outlet in all, like education, because it all stems from education, from a lack of education,
Mm-hmm.
us not going to school. Because if I went to the Burke High School and none of my friends went to school, you think I'm gonna be the only one going to school? No, I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna be doing the same thing that they doing, smoking weed, selling drugs, chasing girls,
Mm-hmm.
committing violent crimes, just doing everything except for what I'm supposed to be doing in order to be successful. We don't have a lot of role models in the inner city of Boston to take lead. You
Yeah.
got some here and there, but they
Yeah.
ain't willing to give back wholeheartedly. So while I was incarcerated, and my thoughts was I'm a right, because that was more of my peace. So when I was stressing or any form of stress, I take to the writing. And I got so good at writing where I didn't have to pen it no more, where I was going straight off my mental. And then I
Yeah.
go type it, and then I edit it like that, and then I go on to the next book. So it was more of disciplining myself, learning my true craft without
Yep.
being a writer. And I had to learn that in prison because while I was on the streets, I didn't have time to even know what a craft was. So when I
Yeah.
was in prison, it was a lot of idle time. And that
Yep.
idle time turned me into an author. So once I came home from prison, that's when I decided to make sure that I was writing exact. And once I was 100% sure that I was writing exact, and then I could give to others and use my story as a backdrop to help them become successful and succeed in life
Yeah.
with my mentorship.
Yeah.
So to
And
the question, it's the misdirection.
yeah.
And what we need is the better direction with those that have that lived experience of doing prison times, or those who was regarded as a shooter, or those that regarded as a kingpin or a leader of their neighborhood. You know, a lot of people my age, we coming out of prison because we spend a whole 20s, 30s, and early 40s in prison, and now
Yeah.
we fed up and we coming back to society to strive to make a change within our community through the direction of positivity.
Yeah. And that's what I see, in regards to everything you're doing. So the event that you have coming up, let's talk about that because it's a big deal. It's your book signing. How many
Yeah.
books have you written so far?
So I wrote 4 books to date, and yeah, I wrote 4 books. So it's a book signing for all the books, but I'm releasing my latest book on that day, and that would be the 4th book.
The fourth book. Now, can you tell us the title?
Yeah, it's called Asset Protection. So
Okay.
it's part of the 3 Pounds of Pressure series. It's actually the first book of the 3 Pounds of Pressure series.
Okay.
So and I wrote that, like, I finished that probably like a few months back. And this one is real dear to me because it breaks down the history of Scar's parents and how they met, and how they came about. So Scar wasn't born yet in this book,
Uh-huh.
but it's the beginning of the mindset that he would go the things that he would go through by seeing what his parents went through before him.
Okay. And I think that's, generational, you know, um things that happen to us. Like I was just talking to somebody about that yesterday, and she was just saying to me, like I feel like there's certain things in me that are bad qualities from my mom and from my own parents. And and I said the same thing. I feel like there's certain qualities that I look at myself and I'm like, okay, I know I need to be better than my parents, and not make the same mistakes. And that was, sometimes you think, oh, you don't want to be just like your parents, or you don't want to, and you kind of start to have these negative, attributes about yourself that you inherit in some way. You know what I'm saying? And a part of me, in regards to the hustle, part of me in regards to the street, that came from my mom. My dad was the church boy. He was, the person who, never went to jail, never did any, bad things. And I got to see two different people. But again, it was for me to understand, okay, these are the bad attributes of my mom that I don't want to take to my life or put in my life, and learn from her mistakes. And I think that's important to dissect that, through what you've inherited, genetically through your parents. That's important. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes people think, oh, I'm just doing what I was taught. But sometimes what we were taught is not right. You know what I'm saying? And
Exactly.
that's where we have to break that down and understand that, one day a man said that to me, well, this is the way I was raised. And, I'm like, well, clearly, the way you raised was not right. You know what I'm saying? But what are you going to do as a man today to change that objective or that narrative? You know what I'm saying? And be a better person. And I think that's what we're all, doing in this life, is trying to be a better work in progress, and just who we've come from. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that's important. I think to make your parents proud, to make your legacy important for your family, is to be better than the last generation. Um,
Exactly.
so that's dope that you wrote that, because that is, a part of it. That's a big part of it, is washing that negative, energy that you've inherited. And a lot of times I realized that, even the slave mentality, a lot of people don't understand that we are still products of that in some way. You know what I'm saying? And I had a woman, cry to me about, the fact that she was a bad person as a white woman, because of her ancestors and what they did to Black people. And I said, listen, you can't hold that to you. You need to be the force that changes it and the person who changes the narrative now. You know what I'm saying? You now created a different story, and you were able to now show them that Black people are not the bad, evil people that they always perceived them to be. So maybe that was their karma, is now, you being part of their lineage who now dates Black men, who now understands that Black people are not bad people. You know what I'm saying? We all have bad people in all different walks of life. You know what I'm saying? So you can't look at that and say, oh, all white people are bad because white people, were the people who invoked slavery. Like, when do we stop that? The blame game. You know what I'm saying? And blaming what our past has been and being who we are today. We have to stop that. I've always been a true believer of that, of accountability. You know what I mean? And taking accountability for who you are today, because we all have the power to change.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And I agree with you 100%. We all have the power to change, but you're gonna want to have to change. Like a lot of people, they don't know how to change. Their mindset is so wicked, whereas they just think everything that they doing negative is positive.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why when I came home from prison, I wanted to make sure that I didn't fall back into that trap of being amongst negative people that I used to be around in the past. I wanted to show them that I changed. So not only that they could ask me for help, that I can show them how to change by
Mm-hmm.
example. I
Mm-hmm.
did over 21 years in prison, and that's just off of two sentences,
Wow.
from the 90s to the 2020s. So when I came home from prison, I was more hurt that I spent all that time in prison and I wasn't able to accomplish anything from my 20s or my 30s because prison took wiped out all them years. So now when I come home, it was like I was in a rat race trying to race
Absolutely.
to find success.
Yeah.
And success was already there. It was already within me. So I had to just sit back and think and make sure that everything that I was doing was right and exact, and make sure everything that I was doing had the positive repercussions of my actions.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people do things and the repercussions be either prison or death.
Yeah.
So, I already experienced prison. I already experienced getting shot at numerous times. I already experienced a large percentage of my friends passing away through gun violence. So, and that's why this event on October 18th is real big to me, because I'm honoring all those, not just my friends, but all those that was lost to gun violence, and all those who also perpetuated gun violence, like myself.
Yeah.
And we bringing my son down. He's a social justice advocate,
Yeah.
speaker. He gonna be the keynote speaker to touch on topics that related to the 3 pounds of pressure, gun violence awareness.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things now, back when we were growing up, I used to always think, how do kids get a hold of guns, and where do they get access to these things? And it was something that, I don't know, it was a tainted situation, because you didn't know where it was coming from, but you knew it was available.
Exactly.
You knew if you made a call or two, you could find what you were looking for. Now these kids are actually building guns.
Yeah.
uh, and I think that's when the narrative really changed for me, was because I'm like, listen, there is no control. How do we control what people are, buying and manufacturing themselves? And it's as easy as them going on YouTube and learning how to build a 747. You know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
like, and it's crazy to me. Like, I was like, when my nephew showed me that, and I was like, what? Like, this is crazy, like, and I just, again, I felt like, the odds are against us in so many ways in the Black communities. You know what I'm saying? Like, I realized, like, people used to always say, Black lives matter, but I felt like until Black lives matter to Black people, it doesn't change anything. Um, so how do you feel about that? With Black on Black violence, I think that we are the highest in the country, in the world, probably, in regards to Black, racially charged violence against each other. And how do we change that?
And all stems from ignorance. So it's like if my neighborhood's warring with another neighborhood, that war might go on for 30 years
Yeah,
until the neighborhoods just no longer exist. Like, you got some of the original neighborhoods in Boston that no longer exist. So now you
yeah,
got these upstart new gangs that just come out of nowhere, and they taking the place of an old school gang that was one of the foundations of what they consider gangbanging in Boston.
yeah,
And by them gangs no longer existing, it's like them neighborhoods taking on new beefs. They
yeah,
allies with the enemies of their forefathers. So it was like never brought to the attention of why these gangs was warring in the first place. So I was more hurt to find out while I was incarcerated that my neighborhood was warring with our rivals over a
yeah,
female that I never knew 10 years prior to me even coming in the streets.
yeah,
So now it was like, I put my reputation, I put everything that I had on my back to carry my hood, only to find out that we killing each other and harming each other over a female who know nothing about what's going on.
yeah. And
And
that's
then
and that's the truth.
Yeah, and that's true. And that's real talk. And that made me look at things different. That made
Yeah,
me value people different. So it don't matter what neighborhood you from in Boston. If I was in federal prison with you, I was cool with you because you ain't done nothing to me. I ain't done nothing to you. And let's keep it like that. Let's build for the better, not for the worse.
yeah. I mean, and honestly, like, I think that it didn't really start to make, like, heads turn or bells ring until we had Tiffany Moore, I believe, from Humboldt that was killed, till we had Jermaine
Yeah.
Goffigan killed. Then you started realizing how serious this was. This was innocent kids being gunned down in the middle of crossfire. And that for me was like, nobody's safe. You know what I'm saying? There's no level
Exactly.
of safety. Grandmothers were shot. There were, mothers that were killed. And I think now it just gets to the point of no respect, no level of integrity, no level of moral. And we have to make a change. We have to stop, these kids from warring over senseless, egotistical things. And that was my biggest thing, is understanding Maya and understanding the ego and pride and understanding what really makes people attack or be vicious towards one another. You know what I'm saying? And depression has a lot to do with that. Self-worth. You know what I'm saying? And I think that we're taught, because we're Black, we're not as worthy or we're not as better. I mean, granted, we have our families who tell us, be Black, be proud. But in the outside world, the Black people already have a cloud over them. And I find that these younger generations, they know that now. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't something where before, like, we were talking about it and it was like, oh, do they really think of us like this? No, now with this new generation, they know, because it's out there. You know what I'm saying? How people feel about us and how, things have changed. And, ever since, we had this big, racial, thing go on, it was just hard for people to not say that this level of racism exists. And that Black people are mistreated, and that, being Black is a crime in some places, and you can't go to certain places still as a Black person. Um, and I think that's hard for this new generation who's very outspoken, who's very political, to understand. They're like, what do you mean? Why hasn't times changed? Because we're not fighting for change together. You know what I'm saying? It's hard for Black people to come together when it's for something that's going to better everybody. But when it's something that, is more violent and more vicious, it's like we all come together, or even for a funeral. You know what I'm saying? We come together to mourn each other, but we don't come together to celebrate each other. So getting more of that, I think, is important. And I think that you bringing to light that, there is something that needs to change in the inner city of Boston is important. You know what I'm saying? And it does. So
And you know,
kudos.
and one of the things that to help with the change is having positive role models. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people come home from prison and they don't really do nothing with their life. It's because they wasn't taught to do nothing with their life. They didn't
Yeah.
do nothing with their life while they was in prison. Like a lot of people that's in prison that got lengthy sentences, they usually play basketball, play sports, watch sports, play card games, and just gossip all day until they get like a year or less to
And
go
now they
home,
want to
and
get
then they
serious.
start to panic. The
Yeah.
difference with me, I started to make a change within my character on my first day in prison because the judge told me that if I ever get incarcerated for any type of drugs, including marijuana, that it would be my third strike and I will automatically get a life sentence because I already did 2 federal convictions for drugs. So any third one is an automatic life sentence. So when he told me that, of course, I disbelieved him. And then when I went into the system and I started studying the law and stuff like that, that's when I seen that it is a thing called the 851 in the federal system, which if you already have prior convictions, they file a notice, and it's a written notice that they file and give it to the judge before your trial, and it double your sentence.
Yeah.
So if I already was facing a life sentence at trial, imagine what they would give me after I did the 15 years for career criminal. So I had to change because I was fooled twice and you ain't gonna fool me a third time.
That's
So I
right.
had to understand the things that I was facing if I chose to go back to the streets, and that risk though outweighed the reward in my life. The money that I
Mhm.
made, it dissipated the day I got locked up or while I was locked up. So I came home not with the wealth that I established before I went in. I came home with the wealth of knowledge to make a change and to help others change once I showed them that I changed.
Yeah. And be a example. That's the biggest thing I tell people. You have to be an example of the better of what you've learned, and you are doing that. Um and and again, like I say, I've watched so many black men in the inner city of Boston go back and forth to prison over and over again and just never get it. And to the point they get into their 40s and 50s and they're still going back and forth to Boston. I mean, going back and forth to prison. And it's like this is all they know. Until they realize that, oh, I'm too old for this. I can't go back to prison again because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to protect myself. And that's a scary feeling. You know what I'm saying? Is understanding that, listen, if you go back to prison, you ain't the young, tough guy that you was 20 years ago, and understanding that you still have enemies and you still have people that look at you as that bad character that you once was. I think that was the biggest thing, is understanding that, is that, you know, everybody's not as forgiving for the things that have happened in the past. You know what I'm saying? People hold grudges. And a lot of that is what I still think transpires in Boston. It's like, oh, I don't like them from 15 years ago. So it's like, yeah, you can't go off of that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, like, you're grown men now. You know what I'm saying? You have to understand that you were just doing what you thought was right at the time. And a lot of people lost their lives. And that's never should be taken for granted. You know what I'm saying? Because there was just times where I remember like going to funeral after funeral, and I think probably in my late 20s, I was like, I'm not doing any more hood funerals. Like, this is disgusting to see that young black men are killing each other this way. You know what I'm saying? As a sport. It's not even, something that you think, oh, it just happens here or there. No, it was happening as a sport. And that for me was like, yeah, no one's life should be taken in that manner. Who are we to decide that, and how do we make changes? And how, like you said, it's education, it's, understanding, the power of mind, because it's mind over matter in a lot of senses. For me, you know what I'm saying, is I think that people make irrational decisions right away because they're being pressured, and then when they look back and they're like, I should have never did that, or if I would have had time to think, I might have not made those choices. So I mean, I feel like there's outlets. I feel like, how do we get more people involved? Is the question going forward. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and that's the power of co-op. Cooperating with each other, collaborating with each other. Like it's a lot of people out here that I once had problems with, and we the best of friends.
Yeah,
And we laugh and joke about the crimes that we committed against each other, but it's
yeah,
more of we looking at things not as a juvenile on a mindset of a juvenile. We looking at things as established adults. Because when I went in prison on my last prison stint, I went in traumatized because two
yeah.
weeks before I got incarcerated, my best friend passed away, and I was with him every single day except the day he got shot. So I always thought about the day he passed away, would I have been in the car with him? So,
Right,
I was looking for every reason to exact revenge on those that was responsible for his death, but I never knew who did it. So I was just waiting to hear who did it so I could have their families feeling the same way that we was feeling with the
right.
loss of my friend. So when I got incarcerated, I was still upset that he passed away. I was hurt,
Yeah.
because he had a young daughter. He had family that loved him, and I
Was
wasn't
that
able.
Day Day?
Yeah, my friend Day Day. So
Yep,
I
I see
wasn't
it.
able to reach out to them because I had no contact with him, because
Yeah,
the only contact I had with him was through him. So by him passing away, that just really took really my breath away. And while I was incarcerated, I was hearing different stories of who might have did it, but it just didn't add up to me because I
right.
know how my friend passed away, I know where he passed away, and I know what might have caused him to pass away because I
Yeah,
spoke to him 2 hours before he got shot. So, and when I found out he got shot, I just really didn't believe it,
yeah.
and that just crushed me. So I always was striving to find ways where I could honor him, like
Hmm.
through business. So when I was in prison, I started learning how to develop businesses and stuff. I'm like, yo, what can I do to make people ask me questions where I can answer it and it be all about Day Day? I'm like, I would have to start something to create a legacy for him so others could see the pain that I felt and the pain that his family felt, and how we made a negative, turned the negative into a positive. So a lot of the things that I'm doing it in honor of him, and I'm
Yep.
doing it for him because I know if the tables would turn, he'd do it for me because our levels of intellect match each other. So
Right.
when we used to be in the neighborhood, of course, we used to do negative things, but we used to always think about positive things to do,
Yeah.
but we just never had the way or the means to do it.
Yeah.
So, and that's why when I went in, I was traumatized because I know I would never see him again. And when I came home and I'm doing the things that I'm doing now, I always say to myself, I know he's proud and I know he's smiling because
Yeah.
I'm doing this for not just me, but I'm doing this for him.
And that makes a big difference. You have a big purpose. You know what I mean? And that's a lot of, weight to carry because you're living out, his life in a way. You know what I'm saying? And turning the negative, like you said, into the positive. And I just want to see it help so many more people. And I think it's time. Like, I think that, it's time for the leaders and for the people like yourselves to stand up and, just say, like, this is not cool. This is not right. You know what I'm saying? And, that was one of the biggest things to me, looking back on the last 15 years of just the violence in Boston. And I'm like, well, where are the elders? Where are the OGs? Where are the people telling them that this is not the right way? This is not the right things to do. And actually leading them into something better and something more fruitful, you know what I'm saying? And more, important. Like, it's not just about violence, you know what I'm saying? And I think that that was our biggest, form of power was violence, is to show that you were the biggest man by being the most feared or uh the most feared. You know what I'm saying? I think that that was the biggest, credit that you could have in the hood was, oh, he's the most feared. But at the end of the day, like, then what? You know what I'm saying? Does it lead you to money? Does it lead you to power? Does it lead you to respect? And respect can only, respect is earned. It's not given. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So it's just like, yeah, you can earn somebody's respect. You know what I'm saying? In so many different ways. You don't have to do it in a violent way.
And
Um,
you right about that. Cause I remember when I was young and we was coming up, and me and Dada used to always like talk about or even argue like which is better, fear or respect. And we always used to choose fear because when you got two people and one respected and one feared, the one that's respected might fear the one that's feared because the
yeah,
one that's feared is usually a notorious figure in your neighborhood or just the city of Boston. So, but the one that's respected, he usually live longer because
yeah,
he got a purpose in life and he's showing true leadership skills.
yeah.
So,
And it's
but
true.
on
It's
the
like,
flip side, the one that have the fear could also kill the one that got respect,
yeah,
and the narrative could change in the in one that has a lack of knowledge. So they might get that confused with fear and respect. So,
right.
and that's one thing that I wanted to teach the youngsters once I came home was to respect everyone. Not
Yeah,
just respect the negative aspect, but respect the positive aspect. Respect your mother, respect your
yeah,
grandmother, respect your kids, respect your elders, respect your neighbors. You
yeah,
know, a lot of people don't know what respect is, so they automatically turn to fear and think fear is respect.
yeah. And it's not. It's not. And again, it's, you know, I was diagnosed at 25 with post traumatic stress disorder.
Yep.
And I realized that that just came from my childhood. And, you know, when the doctor was telling me like what this is, and I'm like, he's like, this usually is something that's in veterans and people that went to war. And I'm like, yeah, well, I grew up in the city of Boston.
Yeah.
It was a war. And just realizing that there's so many of us that are affected by this and we don't even talk about it and we don't even deal with it. Um,
Yep, you're right.
is
And it's
how,
because we don't know the two. It's like
yeah,
we don't know. Like a lot of us diagnosed with it or self-diagnose ourselves with
yeah,
it, and we don't even know that we've been diagnosed with this for years,
yeah,
but it wasn't like where we could understand what post-traumatic stress PTSD is.
yeah,
Coming home from prison, a lot of people have what is called PICS,
yeah,
post-incarceration syndrome. It's similar to PTSD, but it's really geared towards those that's coming home from prison. Like they have anxiety, they have fear, they have depressed issues, they stress, they
yeah,
don't trust no one. So it's like we coming home from prison undiagnosed and we think we normal, but to the outside world, they seeing that we need help. But
yeah,
we scared to ask for help. So that was one of the reasons why we created the Life After Prison to help those not only understand what post-incarceration syndrome is, but also help them through our programming and our services so they don't gotta have to be repeat offenders. They don't have to go back to their communities to ask for money. They don't have the worry of not finding a job or housing. We sit down with them and map out a successful blueprint for their success based on what they want to do in life. Based if they want to be an entrepreneur, we'll help them be an entrepreneur with our network of programming that we have to help those not only incarcerated but those who've been out for a while. You got people that been home for 10 years and they still ain't got their life on track. So we
that's
cater
right.
to them. We cater to the ones that's currently incarcerated to help them give them hope of succeeding after prison because nobody want to keep continuously going to prison. You can
Yeah,
sit down and ask a person, be like, yo, do you want to go back? They're going to say no. But their mindset is so lost, they don't even know where to begin or not to even entertain any negative thoughts for them not to go back to
that's
prison.
right.
Going to prison is one of the easiest things to do.
Yeah,
Staying out is one of the hardest things to do
true.
because you haven't learned how to discipline yourself to stay out of prison, to stay away from negative crowds, to stay
Yeah,
away from toxic females, to stay away from former friends who want to bring you back into that society because they love that society.
yeah,
So, and that's just a minute fraction of the work that the Life After Prison does, and once again, I had to use my life as a testament to
yeah,
show. I had to come home and become an entrepreneur. I had to come home and create clothing lines, write books, and do things so I don't have to worry about looking fresh or selling drugs to buy clothes or
yeah,
different sources of income. So
yeah,
I'm able to teach those who have a lack of education how to create multiple streams of income. And
Yeah.
I show them through experience, not by just speaking it.
Yeah. And you're proving it. I mean, I think you're a pinnacle of that now, in regards to what I see you doing and the work that I see you doing. And so tell me, I know it's at the bottom of the screen, all business Mike Ms.
Yep, Miz. Yep.
on Instagram, but how do people find you in regards to life? It's lifeafterprison.org, right?
Yep, the lifeafterprison.org. So they could
Oh,
find me they could send a message on, they could go to the lifeafterprison.org and they could become a member, or they could just send me an email. We get all the emails and we
okay.
know automatically we get alerts on the new members. So they could just send a message, or they could follow me on Instagram, or they could follow me on Facebook, Mike Curry on Facebook, Mike Curry on LinkedIn, and or any social media platform. The Life After Prison's on every social media platform. Mike Curry's on every social media platform. You can find me there, and I could do assessment with you, and we could sit down, and I can help you get your life right. Like, it's never too late. It's never
No.
too late to garner success. It's
And I
never
mean,
too late.
I have a friend who basically runs a rehabilitation house for men. And they have a couple of them out here in Lister. And they're always looking for resources and ways for these guys to get back, into everyday society. And like you said, it's challenging, it's hard. And I know that. So, does Life After Prison, do you just only cater to Massachusetts, or are you global?
No, we don't cater to Massachusetts. We cater to every global,
Okay.
because I did federal time, so I
Yep.
don't just try to make everything local.
Yeah.
I strive to make sure that the Life After Prison is on a global status,
Hmm.
because it's people that's affected by the same things that we was affected by in Boston and every major city in the
Yeah.
United States. So, when we do our posts and we share our flyers nationwide. When we do our events, we do our events nationwide. It's just so I'm just so ecstatic that I'm able to help so many, not just in my communities, but others' communities
Yeah.
across the country. You
I
know,
was reading someone's case, a couple of people that I knew that were in the federal penitentiary in Connecticut.
yeah,
And Connecticut laws are way more crucial, like especially federal time. Like they had like I want to say they were in the 100-year, like they had 100-year sentences for things that I
yeah,
was like, in Boston, you would have never got that. You know what I mean? And just
exactly.
understanding that the statutes of limit, laws are different. And being from a Commonwealth state, we really understand that on a whole different level compared
Yeah.
to all these other states, that are
And,
right next
yeah.
door to us.
And it depends on the judges you have, because you might have a sentence of 0 to 40 years. But if
Yeah.
you got a lenient judge, he might only give you 5, 6, 7 years. But if you catch a case down south and it's a similar case, they might just give you the max. So
Yeah.
it's just crime, and your criminal history by is affected by what you've done in the past. And it's up to those who judge you, that sentence you to what they feel you deserve. And most of the time they sentence you more. They sentence you to draconian sentences that could end your life.
Yeah. I mean, and with, the new presidency, we're going up for the new presidency with Kamala Harris and I believe Trump. I don't watch TV as much anymore just because I'm a real political person and I don't like, just the way the things are going and the narratives and how people can't see what's really transpiring behind the scenes and how this is all driven by money and power and not by the people. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that a lot of people understand that, the politicians really don't have the people's best interest at hand. They have their own agendas and they have their own, reasons for power and for, races and things like that and tearing each other down. And it's, I want to say one of the biggest gangs in the country, aside from the police, is politicians. And I think that, a lot of, things that have transpired, people thought, oh, these people were doing what's right for the people, but they were doing what was right for their people, for the people that they were trying to protect, and not really understanding that the people that were actually building the country are the people who are the most affected. Um, and so it was kind of hard for me, with the whole Camilla Harris thing, because I was like, some people might think, oh yeah, she's great, she's a black woman, whatever, whatever. But then I look at the things that she did in regards to, institutionalized black men and things like that, and I say, is this a person that you want to lead the country? So do you have any thoughts on that, and have you been following it at all?
I don't really follow politics too much because it's too much of a touchy issue. You could say the right or the wrong thing, and
Yeah.
you could say the right thing and it's be considered the wrong thing towards
Yeah.
people. So I just strive to just try to keep it neutral, to be honest, and just
Yeah.
focus on, because it don't matter who's president. It really don't change what goes on or the problems we have in the inner city. So I
Yeah.
just strive to make that change by example.
Yeah. And how do you feel like you're gonna, be able to connect to, as I feel like you're connecting, one person at a time. But to be able to do it on a wide scale and things like that. I think that this event will be one of the biggest ones as well. Coming up is that you have the ability to bring in so many different people. My son, I want to say, is one of those people, like you said, he's a civil rights activist. He's all about, um, just basically shedding light on the wrongdoings in prison and how people are mistreated and how people are, suffering and not being given proper, attention, or just, being able to exercise their rights. And I think that's important because there is a problem with that within the, in the prison system. Um, and it's, again, it was like I seen one where he went to a prison and I think they had no lights or something like that, and they sat out there and they protested. But it takes people like that. It takes people, saying it's bigger than me, and actually fighting for humanity and fighting for people, to have just civilization, and just to have, a good health check, wellness check. You know what I'm saying? It's like there were people that weren't getting wellness checks, that were injured, that, weren't getting medical treatment or, assistance. And that, I think that that's a harsh, way to live. And we should never, you know, look to have people live that way. One of the things that I seen recently was a jail in the UK, and they basically leave everything open. The prisoners can roam and they can do whatever they want, and they don't have violence within the prison system. So it's doable, and I think that it's just all about how the prisons are organized and how they're led. You know what I'm saying? That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And before we end this, one of the things that I realize is that you have to have a strong support system coming home from prison. And luckily, I was able to have a strong support system who was able to help me manage not just my life, but the things that I was doing for the future. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons and one of the persons that helped me was Treese. She
Yeah.
helped me with not only co-founding the Life After Prison, but she helped me with the necessary life skills in order for me to be successful.
Yeah.
And within everything, within mental health issues, within physical or anything that I needed, she
Yeah.
was there to make sure that there was an alternative to the things that I might have been thinking or the acts that I might have been thinking. And I would
She's
just
a
like to
real
say,
one.
yeah,
She's a real
definitely.
one for that. I'm
And I
telling you, it's
Yeah,
not
she's real.
easy what she did, and how
Yeah.
she's been patient and understanding and helping you. And again, Mike, it's your story. You guys' story is one to talk about. I hope you write a book about your life, your love
Yeah,
story
yeah.
for her.
Nah. It's in the works,
You
but
definitely got to write
yeah,
that.
definitely. And I would like to say thank you for the interview. And
Yes,
it
you
was a
family.
blessing. It was a
Yes,
blessing to come on your platform and share my story and my experience. And
I
you
want you to
know,
come back. I
yeah,
definitely,
definitely.
I'm trying to change the narrative. I know you have to go, but I'm definitely trying to change the narrative and have more entrepreneurs and CEOs and advocates like yourself come on and talk to the youth, and just find different ways that we can organize and structure things like you're talking about, to get everybody involved, because I think we all have a piece, in this story, and
Yeah. So
just
let's
making
make
it
it
better,
happen.
making it a
Yeah,
community.
let's make
3
it
pounds
happen.
of pressure.
Yeah, 3 pounds of pressure. We see you on October 18th. And I would like to thank you for the work that you do in the community as well.
Thank you.
Because the work that you do, you're a visible face on Facebook, on social media, period. So, I would
Yes.
just like to thank you for being, just a beacon in our community. You give us hope to want to do things and just carry things on for the positive. And
Yeah,
also
man.
I would like to thank the Up North City girls as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. I
Unseen hands in the building and behind the
think. Yep,
scenes.
behind the scenes. Okay.
Have a good Sunday, Mike.
Okay, you too.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, you guys, we are wrapping up. That was a dope conversation, real podcast talk with Miss TML. We switching it up. We doing some great interviews with some great entrepreneurs, people who are trying to make changes in the community, in the world. That's what this podcast is about, real conversations that need to be had within relationships, within homes, within communities, within, work, things like that. We definitely need to have these discussions. And I am just so honored to sit down with Mike. He is a beacon of truth, and he speaks from experience, from knowledge of self, of, just going through the storm and actually transitioning and coming out of it on top. And again, his story is one to talk about. It's one to put on a pedestal, because he is actually out here about his business and making change after his incarceration in federal prison. This is important. These are things that we need to have conversations about to evolve and to better ourselves and to understand that we are not in this alone. And everyone is affected when a man goes to prison. Your children, your mother, your kids, your peers, your siblings, everyone is, affected by this in some way, shape, or form. And this is something that we need to talk about. We need to have open conversations about. And I'm just honored again. 3 pounds of pressure. Pick it up. Definitely, you can find it online. I believe I was able to find this on Amazon as well. So you can definitely, I know Teresa's has this everywhere in every major on-stream bookstore. You can definitely find 3 pounds of pressure, a novel by Mike Curry. He also has a new book that he has coming out called Protect Your Assets. So I'm looking forward to that. And again, you guys, you have a great Sunday. And I thank you for tuning in. Real Podcast Talk with TML. I'm out.